Me, mate. Sorry.
Good afternoon. Maybe evening for some of you, but my name is W. Wade Ross. I am the founder and the state director of the Texas Small Farmers and Ranchers community-based organization. My prayer tonight is that we have a productive meeting that addresses many of our land retention concerns, that will unite us to continue to work and discuss together on going forward.
Hello, I'm Anita Pauline Roth, Wade's wife, and the executive administrator of Texas Small Farmer and Ranchers community-based organization. And we would like to welcome each of you for participating in this event, which is essential to moving forward with the issues that will result from our presentations and discussions this evening. Wade and I would like to tip our hats to each of you that are here tonight. Next, we'd like to introduce Rudolph K. Mattair, President and Executive Director of the Texas Black Caucus Foundation. The son of Haitian immigrants, Rudy is of the first generation in his family to complete higher education, graduating from not only the University of Texas College of Liberal Arts with a BA, but also a Master in Public Affairs from the LBJ School of Public Affairs and a Doctor of Jurisprudence from the University of Texas School of Law. He has been a tireless advocate in the community, speaking and working on a host of issues ranging from teaching at-risk children by co-authoring an honor code for the University of Texas, helping forge a partnership with local law enforcement and the State Bar of Texas to address the issue of community policing and creating pro bono legal advice clinics for United States military veterans. Welcome, Rudy.
I want to say thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Ross for that wonderful introduction and Mr. Ross for that prayer. Good evening, everybody. One of the things that makes me so excited and so proud and feel so blessed about being ahead of this organization is the ability to go ahead and cause bridges, create bridges, and bring people together. I think oftentimes when we talk about the issues and concerns that we have in society, we understand, being in this country, we are blessed with so many different resources and allies and groups. However, more often than not, what I see is that those groups may not necessarily, come together in various aspects of concerns, or even be cognizant of how they can work with one another. The Black Caucus Foundation, its goals is to support, to be frank with you, the caucus. The Black Caucus in the state has been working on issues regarding systemic racism, a variety of different things regarding equality and equity in this state for decades. And for them to be able to go ahead and have the actual information, data points, and honestly, donations to go ahead and make good legislation, good policy for this state. In turn, what the foundation goals is not only to go ahead and give that information, provide that data points with that as well, but also provide different groups and allies and bring them together in foresights with these organizations and these goals in mind. What you see here tonight and what you'll see in this throughout this program are various people across this state have one goal in mind: to help Black farmers, to make sure that their success is a success that's reflective of the opportunities that are given not only in this state and in this country. More often than not, we've seen that the issues that we face in this country are issues that truly come from a level where it's not that we can't anticipate these goals, it's not that we can't go ahead and achieve greatness, but it's actually coming together in a combined nature to make that happen. And what I'm so proud of to see the people here today and the various groups here today is that each and every one of them are stakeholders and truly allies in this cause. One of them, I want to introduce you to, is the CEO of the Texas Bankers Association, Chris Furlow. Chris Furlow is a man who not only goes and understands these issues when it comes to farming in this country, in this state in particular, and how the role the banks can play on it, but he truly created policies and groups and programs to make sure they bridge these gaps. Chris, I'll let you take it from here.
Well, Rudy, thank you so much, and good evening, everybody. Agriculture is a part of the lifeblood of the state of Texas, and since the founding of the Texas Bankers Association in 1885, the ties between farming, ranching, and banking have been inextricable. And the individual relationships between our bankers and farm and ranch customers have been invaluable to the growth of Texas. Black farmers and ranchers have played critical roles in this history, but historically, there have been great shortfalls in equality, in justice, and access to financial resources and information over the decades. That's not something I have to tell anyone in this meeting today. But what I do want to make sure to tell you is that the Texas Bankers Association and our 400 plus members are working to be a force for growth and unity in every community for today and for the future. Many of our bankers today continue to also be farmers and ranchers and understand your challenges. And it's why we are so proud to be a partner in today's event. It is why we are proud to partner with the Texas Small Farmers and Ranchers community-based organization, with the Legislative Black Caucus Foundation, University of North Texas Dallas College of Law, and the Law Office of LD Thomas. So thank you, P. Wade Ross. Thank you, Rudy, LD, Eric, Shirley, and certainly Mr. and Mrs. Ross. And by the way, Mr. Ross, again, I think your hat looks better than P. Wade's, but that's just my opinion. But we are very proud to stand with you to help preserve Black farms and ranches for your families, and to help preserve the honored place of Black family farmers and ranchers in the history of Texas. So God bless everybody. Really looking forward to tonight's program.
Thank you, Chris, for those wonderful words. We really do appreciate it. I feel, well, let me put it this way. When we were thinking about this program and ideas and folks and how to make sure that, we connected with each and every one of you to understand that we understand your plight, we understand these issues that you're going through, and how, in fact, how we can be more impactful. We wanted to make sure that we brought true allies and folks in there who understood that. Chris is one of them. And our next speaker has been someone who has been in this cause, in these trench wars for a long, long time. Things happen, God works in mysterious ways. It's something I truly believe in, that we're blessed over there as well. We have MLK's birthday coming up this Monday. And when we talk about civil rights, how often as many of us, each and every one of you understand that? I'll be frank with you. I never heard about the civil rights regarding Black farmers. I never heard about the plights and the issues that had come from there, regarding banking, regarding loans, what happened with the USDA and those issues. Yet there was someone who, during the heights of the civil rights movement, who was working on these issues, who stood up at times when people told her to sit down, who actually created land banks and ideas and tracts to go ahead and make a discernible difference, who at one point owned the largest tract of Black-owned land in this country. And that's our next speaker, Shirley Sherrod. Her story is so impactful and so powerful, it's astounding. How she was early on raised, and frankly, the events of her life helped shape who she is today, is something that truly resonated with me, and I feel like will resonate with each and one of you. Her fight and her actions and working with the USDA to ask for not only true equality, but equity when it comes to all farmers, especially Black farmers and heights that work from there, makes a discernible difference. Her organization, New Communities, what I love about that, the vision being distilled, preserve, farm, and culture. Wow. I'm not quite sure how else to go ahead and actually articulate and synthesize it any better than that. We're honored to have this proud graduate of the renowned HBCU Albany State University, who also went ahead and received her master's at Antioch College, to be here to speak today, Ms. Shirley Sherrod.
Good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure for me to be able to share with you and to learn more about you and the work that you're doing. I'm really happy to hear of the coalition you have formed and the things you're working toward for farmers in Texas. You know, I grew up on a farm, and I can tell you, as I picked cotton and did all of the back-breaking work on the farm, I had no intention of spending my life. I didn't want to have anything to do with agriculture, period, past high school. I wanted to get out of the South. I'm from Baker County, Georgia, and one of the worst sheriffs in our history was known as the Gator, and even the sheriff before him had a reputation that impacted some of the things that are happening to us today in terms of proven intent. So my goal, I had two, I wanted to get away from the work on the farm, and I wanted to get away from the South because life was so hard for us trying to survive during the Jim Crow era. So as I was going into my senior year of high school, I couldn't share with my parents that I didn't want to be in the South, that I didn't want to be on the farm. I think my daddy, I had 4 sisters, and I think my father would have been happy if all of us had married and come back to the farm. He wanted a son, though. They kept having children, trying to get a son, but there were 5 girls. And during my senior year, he was so happy. He's getting a new home built and things were going well on the farm. My mother seemed to be sick all the time. And that's when I learned that the doctor had confirmed that she was pregnant. He told everybody, this is the boy. So things were looking good and feeling good, except I couldn't share with them that I did not want to have a life in the South, nor a life dealing with agriculture. But my world came tumbling down on March the 15th, 1965. It's just a couple of months before graduation. My father was murdered by a white farmer. And he was shot on the 15th. He died actually on the 25th. I thought he would live. I really thought he would live, but he didn't. So there was lots of time to think rather. The man who killed him was never arrested. The all-white grand jury said there wasn't enough evidence to call it murder. So he went scot-free. And on the night of my father's death, as our house filled with people, my mother was 7 months pregnant. My whole, as the oldest, I felt I needed to do something. What could I do? I couldn't pick up a gun and go try to kill the man. I was searching for answers. So I just went into one of the bedrooms away from everybody else because I needed to think. And as I sat there praying and asking God to help me come up with an answer, the thought entered my my mind that I could give up my dream of living a life in the North. I could stay in the South and devote my life to working for change. Now, I'm 17 years old at that point. I had not been active in the civil rights movement at that point. We had supported the civil rights movement in Albany, Georgia, but we were not active other than trying to help raise money to support the efforts there. But I can remember a calmness coming over me. I had no idea how I would carry out that commitment, but I knew I had made a decision. So it was June of 1965. On the day I graduated from high school, my brother was born. So my father had called that one just right. He told everyone this was the son. And shortly after that, I had an aunt who was a principal of a school in Atlanta and had her PhD. She just insisted that I come to Atlanta for the short course. I think it was 4 or 6 weeks at Clark College. It was a pilot upward bound program. So I went there, and then while I'm there, they're telling me that SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, had come into Baker County to help us start the civil rights movement. So I ended up having to stay there, but I came home for 4th of July and I attended my first mass meeting. And I can remember being in that meeting and just crying. I knew that this was one way I would be able to carry out my commitment to work for change. Still didn't know all of the details, but that summer we faced the Gator, and every week I went to try to register to vote. The Gator was there pushing me out of the courthouse. He ruled everything and everyone. You couldn't even ride through the county without being stopped. And he collected money on the road. At one point, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution estimated his take on the road to be $150,000 a year, but no one tried to stop it. We were surrounded by plantations. And I can tell you that I grew up in a community where it was all Black owned land and all relatives. My relatives were there, I know, and shortly after the Civil War. I don't know whether they were there before then, haven't been able to pull that history together. But we were landowners, and I didn't realize the value of that as I was making my decision to get away from the farm. I didn't realize the life that we lived on land that we owned that was so different from that of people living on the plantations. And many of them were forced off the plantations when we started the civil rights movement because they participated. So I got deeply involved in fighting, not just in Baker County. I ended up marrying the person, Charles Sherrod, who was the field secretary for SNCC. He was the first field secretary and one of the founding members of SNCC. So my work then really, not just in Baker. In fact, I can tell you we got an injunction against the sheriff that summer. We did a lot of stuff to stop the things he was doing. So I'm deeply into it, and now finally realizing the value of owning land, the possibilities for people who own land and worked together. So really tried to help farmers access programs through USDA, which was very difficult. There was so much discrimination going on. In fact, my mother is still living in the home that my father was having built when he died. He got the first loan from Farmers Home Administration to build a home, first loan a Black person had received. And he wanted a brick house, but he was told that a Black person could not borrow the money to build a brick home. All of the white farmers who were getting loans for houses had brick homes, but he couldn't. And I'll just tell you, when I worked for USDA years later, that program fell under my leadership. So I just wish my father had been able to live to know that I, I was in charge of that program for the agency many years later. So as we were working with farmers and so forth, we realized we had to do more with people in communities. So we came up with this idea of trying to build our own community. When I look back, it's like, we're talking 1968, 1969. We had to be almost crazy, but we were determined. So during the summer of 68, I'm sorry, my husband, along with 6 others, went to Israel to look at how they were resettling their people. There was a possibility of funds through OEO, the Office of Economic Opportunity, to assist us with trying to buy land and help our people. So I just want to tell you that when they returned from that trip, that we concluded that basic to large scale economic and political growth and security for Black people in the South is a system of land ownership that prevents foreclosure and loss of land, which has been the Achilles heel of Southern Black people through the years. We agreed that when we returned the group returned to the US, we would work towards setting up an independent structure to buy, hold, and lease land in perpetuity to individuals and cooperatives for agricultural, industrial, and other economic and social purposes to make possible their earning a living, producing for their own needs and for the larger society, finding creative expression for their skills and talents, educating their children, and enjoying all the rights, benefits, and responsibilities of free citizens. We got our hands on 5,735 acres of land. And we put an option on it because OEO had promised a major investment in our effort once we completed the planning. So we went through a year of planning. I can tell you that this was a major piece of property. There was a railroad with a spur onto the land. There was a US highway, US 19, that went through the property, and we had 2.5 miles of highway frontage on US 19. There were lots of creeks and there was something called the Eagle Pond area for conservation efforts. Had we not encountered discrimination, we would have been able to pay that land off just with the leasing of that property, but we were Black and could not. Nature Conservancy would not assist us because of who we were. Opposition surfaced immediately. And at times, as we were in the planning process, gun would go off, someone shooting at buildings with us in them. The opposition politically and so forth started, so that by the end of the year of planning, Lester Maddox, who was governor of the state of Georgia, vetoed all money coming into the state for our project. And here we were with 5,735 acres and didn't have the funds to be able to actually pay the land off. So we started farming. There were others who said without the government's help, there was no way we would be able to make it. But we fought our foreclosure for a couple of years and started farming and pieced things together to be able to do what we did, but we came up with a major farming operation. We had, back then you had peanut allotments and the government had to purchase whatever you grew at the support price back then. Black farmers would have very small acreage allotments, but because we bought this piece of property, it carried a 325 acreage allotment, which was very valuable. Anyway, our efforts, we would order liquid fertilizer and wouldn't know until the crop was up that we didn't get what we ordered. Corn would be different heights all over the field. It forced us to have to get a sample. You know, once we realized what we were working against, we had to get a sample for every delivery that was made. We encountered, even in selling the peanuts, the corn and so forth, discrimination there. We'd get yields out. You carry a #1 quality product in, but you get a low yield on it. And you get a low, it's not yield, is when they, when they grade, a low grade was what I'm trying to say. So all of that would hurt our efforts. But in spite of that, we were making it happen. We couldn't build the housing and so forth, but we could make enough money to hold on to the land. And we were doing a good job at that. But we ran into droughts, and we didn't go to try to get a loan after the first year, but after the second year, we had no choice but to try to go to Farmers Home Administration like all farmers were doing. We even learned those plantations that were owned by rich people were also getting those emergency loans that were denied to us, because when we went to the local office, the county supervisor said, "You'll get a loan here over my dead body." And we fought for 3 years just to get an emergency loan, which was too long to go without the proper financing and continued drought. And then the other thing that has happened to Black farmers through the years, I guess, anyway, through the years, you have to give them a lien on all available assets. And once the agency got a lien on all available assets, then they could engineer the foreclosure. So in 1985, we lost everything. We had assets worth between $4 and $5 million. They sold it to a rich guy out of Atlanta for $1 million. And we later learned, when we were filing our claim in the Black farmers lawsuit, they let him borrow $950,000 of that at a time when they could have offered servicing options to us, but would not do so. And what he did is he took bulldozers and dug holes and pushed all of our buildings over in them, getting rid of everything there that even reminded him of us. And then he later broke it up into tracts and sold it. But we were gone. Now, it was at that point that I started working with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, and not only organizing farmers in Georgia, but I had the opportunity to organize farmers in Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, and in some other states as well, but the concentration was in the 4 states in this area. So I had the opportunity to take advantage of all I had learned growing up on the farm, where I thought I wasn't interested, and all that I had learned as I worked with farmers, and especially with the property that we had. We said 6,000 acres because they actually taxed us on 6,500 acres, but it was 5,735 more or less. I organized farmers into cooperatives because I'm a firm believer that the day when a farmer, a Black farmer especially, can just work his property and not worry about working with others, that day is long gone. We really do have to depend on each other. We do need to work together. I've been able to get farmers into markets that one farmer could not have gotten in, but working together. At one point, we experienced so much discrimination trying to sell at the state farmers market in Thomasville, Georgia, which is an auction market, we ended up, the only way we could get around that and try to help farmers make some money was to partner with groups in Boston, Massachusetts. So we actually grew seedless watermelons and shipped them from Boston, Georgia to Boston, Massachusetts. And there are many examples of things we had to do, creating a market where there was no possibility of a market for them through the years. So as we were working with farmers, developing all kinds of programs to assist them, doing lots of training, we realized that no matter how much we did, the discrimination at USDA was winning. We were still losing lots of farmers and lots of farmland. And therefore, a lawsuit was necessary. Now, people hear about the Pickford case, but we had made the decision early on to file a lawsuit against USDA. And we had 2 nonprofit law firms working on it. So, and we picked 6 Black farmers as the test cases for them. And things were going along quite well, but a slick lawyer went to them and got them to sign a retainer. So the case didn't end up like it would have if we had been able to continue as we were going. But, you know, you're dealing with the statute of limitation. We were able to deal with that. And therefore, Paris, the lawyer out of DC, could come in and take advantage of all that had been done leading up to that and filed the Pickford case. Tim Pickford is a farmer we had worked with through the years in North Carolina. So we refer to it as the Black Farmers Lawsuit. I was so busy, I can tell you, helping farmers as USDA wanted to settle. I was so busy helping farmers gather the information they needed to file their claim. Almost completely forgot about our loss. I get so involved when I'm assisting farmers that I just, you know, I've worried so much about rain for farmers and so forth, because I know how important it is when they don't have irrigation. But anyway, I was driving from Alabama one night after I had been there working with farmers during the day, and the light bulb went off. Oh my goodness. New communities, you had to have been farming between the years 1981 and 96. And there were some other criteria as well. But we were farming during that time and therefore qualified to file a claim in the Pickford case. I didn't have a cell phone or anything and had about another 2 hours to drive. So I couldn't wait to run into my house when I got home that night to tell my husband, we can file a claim in Pickford, you know. So we did that, and we filed the claim prior to the deadline, which was October 13, 1999. And if you had been in the hearing, we filed a B claim. If you had been in our hearing, you would have left there saying they just won their case. But no, they ruled against us, and the judge had put a process in place where you could appeal. We ended up appealing, and I can tell you it took 10 years to get justice in this situation with all of the evidence there. But finally, so we filed our claim before the deadline of October 13, 1999. And on the night of July 8, 2009, our lawyer called and said we had won. Now, I didn't want to get excited because I thought she's going to tell me we had won, but maybe got $1 or something. So she said, you want to guess how much? And I said, is it at least $1 million? She said, no, it's 12. So after all of the struggles, and you know, it's nighttime when she's calling, and my husband and I, we said, you got to fax this to us because we need to see it. It was unbelievable that we had actually won. And that night, I think both of us just cried. We could not believe it because the dream started back in 1968. And here we were now with a chance to try to get more land, because it's important for us to
I mean, when that's part of what has happened to us as Black people. We've been displaced from the land. You know, we were training some young kids to plant a garden. And one young boy who was about 8 years old stood off. He didn't want to get involved. And so we were asking him, we were planting broccoli and cabbage. And we're asking him, don't you want to get help? And don't you want to know how to do this? No, he said, I don't eat food from the earth. It has nature on it, you know? And so when we asked him, where do you get your food from? He said, from the grocery store. When we started explaining to him where that comes from, he put his hands over his eyes and like, stop. He didn't want to hear it. So when you look at some of the things that's happening with Black youth today, you know, I look at what I got from living on the land and living off the land. And then the pride we had as landowners and what that meant for us. So much of that has been lost. But anyway, we finally got, I have to tell you what else happened that month. So that's July 8th. On July 30th, I get a call from the White House saying I had been selected as USDA Georgia State Director for Rural Development. Now, they had tried to get me in back in during the Clinton administration, but Sam Nunn, who was the senior democratically elected official in the state, it was his call, and he wasn't about to let me in as state director. In fact, we didn't have one until, because he didn't support Clinton early on. When he voted for NAFTA, he could announce all of his appointments. So I didn't get in back in '93. And here they were calling me, telling me that I had been selected in 2009. Well, I just heard a little over 2 weeks before that we had gotten the money from we were getting the money from the Pickford case. And now I need to be here in Southwest Georgia working on this, but I knew I had to accept the position because I didn't know when a Black person would ever have the opportunity again to get, because we'd never had a person of color in the position. So the guy, you know, I was a little slow. He's like, you're still gonna do it, aren't you? And I'm like, oh yes, because I'd already started thinking I've got to move to Athens. You know, I got to find a place to stay in Athens. It's about 200 miles from my home. So, and the money had not come at that point, but I also told them, you have to know that New Communities just won. In fact, New Communities won the largest payout in Pickford. And, but the appointment didn't have anything to do with that. They didn't know about that. You know, if things were happening because of the work I had done through the years. So I went and got deeply involved in USDA, and I'd never worked for anything other than nonprofits that we created. So it was interesting working from the other side. And it was also interesting because in '96, they reorganized USDA. Before then, all of the programs were under Farmers Home Administration. So they separated rural development programs from the farmer programs. And now here I was, the state director, and a lot of the people were folks I had to encounter in those offices in the earlier years. And all of a sudden now I'm their boss, so to speak. But I told them I really was not there to settle any scores. I said, if I don't get but two things done while I'm here, that is to make sure people of the state know the programs of the agency and know that they have equal access. And what I found is Georgia was sending a lot of money back to DC that should have been used in the state. So I insisted on people going out to, doing outreach. They were not doing that. They had closed a bunch of offices trying to get each area down to just 2. I stopped that, especially in one of the poorest areas of the state. And so I'm busy trying to really get as much done as I could during the time I was there. I made a speech in Douglas, Georgia for the NAACP group there. That speech was taped. It was on TV, and I knew that. But I talked about what happened to my father. And my point was, and I talked about my work through the years, and my point was, if I can set all of that aside to try to work with anyone, then we should all try to do so. And that was the whole purpose behind telling things that had happened through the years. Well, there was this person out in California by the name of Breitbart who took a copy of my speech and cut and spliced to make it appear that I refused to help a white farmer in my position as state director of rural development. The story I told about the first white farmer who came to me for help and to save his farm was 24 years before that. All of that had happened 24 years earlier. And at that point, I really thought all white farmers got everything they wanted from the agency. So it was working with that farmer, I really saw that it had a lot to do with being plugged in and the haves and the have-not, and so I saw that this white farmer actually was treated like a lot of Black farmers have been treated through the years. But anyway, Breitbart took it. I'm busy working, not knowing all of this stuff. He was going after Obama and using me to try to get him by saying, in my position as a government employee, I refuse to help a white farmer, which was not true. So on the day all of you all found out about this, as this was unfolding, I was over in a part of Georgia where the Kia plant is located. And all, as they say, all hell was breaking loose. All the hate calls were coming in. And I won't go into all of that, but I'll say to you that the Obama administration, without even trying to get to the truth, told me I was being placed on administrative leave. And before I could drive all the way, I was about 3.5 hours from Athens with part of the staff. Before I could drive back to Athens, they asked me to pull to the side of the road and use my BlackBerry to submit my letter of resignation. I did that, but I told them, you haven't heard the last from me. They don't know, I'm a fighter. I don't give up. It might take me 10 years, it might take me 20 years, but I don't give up just like that. And I didn't. In fact, I drove home that night. The next morning, all of these news agencies were in my yard. I did an interview on CNN. And while I was on CNN, the white farmer I had talked about through the years, I kept trying to tell them, we became really good friends and I saved his farm. They called in to CNN while I was on the air to say what I did for them. And the story started turning around. I was on every network just about for that whole week. It ended with the secretary apologizing. By that Thursday, because it started unfolding on Monday, I got a call from the president. They offered me another job. There was no way I was about to go back to USDA. So, I feel, I've organized farmers through the years. We continue to do that with the training. So we started looking for land and we found this property. I'm sitting here in my home. It takes me about 15 minutes to get to it from where I am. It comes right up to the city limits of Albany, Georgia. It was a former slave plantation. We didn't know all of that history when it was purchased, but it was once owned by the largest slave owner and the wealthiest man in the state of Georgia. The previous owner invented the system for paying for fuel at the pump. So he had lots of money to put into that place. It's about 1,638 acres. There's an antebellum house that was built back in the 1851. it had been, they had added to it and done some renovations through the years, but this guy actually spent $3 million renovating and adding on to this, just that. There's the 85-acre lake, there are cabins, there's farmland, there's an area around that house we call the culture. So the preserved farm culture is part of it. We have lots of demonstrations going on out there. We're actually growing rice using a different method where you're using less water, less fertilizer, less seeds. We are putting in a truffle demonstration in February of this year. We have Satsuma oranges. They're some of the juiciest and sweetest oranges you want to taste. We have a vineyard, muscadine grapes. We haven't added the ones for wine yet, but that's part of the plan. And there were 85 acres of pecan trees. We added 115 acres. And we are organizing a cooperative of farmers who have trees. Many of them don't have the acreage we have, but trying to help them and train them so that they get the quality that we have, so that we can help them get into some of the markets that we have been able to get into. Our goal is to also have a processing site. Right now, we have to depend on other processes to do our processing. So there's so, and one thing I can say to you, and one thing I say to young people, don't ever say what you'll never do, because you just don't know. I had to catch myself once when I had to organize a group of farmers to grow feeder pigs, and they didn't want to be trained. And I said that one of the criteria for getting these hogs is that you have to agree to training. They didn't, oh no, we know. So when the hogs came, the guy from the Heifer Project came and he said, that's it. Look, let me tell you all of the things that are wrong. I actually called the University of Georgia to try to get the training for these farmers after that. And they pushed me off to Fort Valley, who didn't have staff in the area. So the next meeting I went in there training them how to grow hogs and talking about when to castrate, when to clip eye teeth and so forth. I can tell you, I didn't have any more trouble out of those men ever again. Many of them, before they would get a tractor, they'd want to sit down with me to discuss it. I came from a family where one of my uncles was an extension agent when he could only work with Black farmers and not white farmers. And I had uncles who were vocational ag teachers as well. So, this has been a journey. I'm trying, we're developing a food hub. There's so much I could share. What I have to say to you all is you gotta come. You have to come. It's so special when you walk on those grounds where, I know slaves had to help build the original part of the structure for that house. And there are places where I can walk there and I just feel their presence and wonder if there was ever a time they could have imagined that Black people would one day have this place. And see, we look at it as a place for healing. So we're not trying to build something just for Black people. We're trying to bring white, Hispanic. When we first started, we had blessing of the land ceremonies where we tried to get every ethnic group in the area on site to do the blessing from their culture. So I don't want to, I could go on and on and on. When you've been doing this work for 50-some years, you have many, many, many stories to tell. But I really appreciate the opportunity of being able to share some of it with you tonight. Thank you so much.
Wow. That's thank you so much, Mrs. Sherrod. Powerful information and insight. And thank you so much for your continued service to our community. Hello, everybody. I'm P. Wade Ross with Texas Small Farmers and Ranchers, community-based organization, and I'll be serving as your moderator for this point forward. So we're going to bring in our next panelists. They are two highly respected professionals in their field. They'll be sharing their expertise on the topic of family land. Degree in public administration from University of Texas at Arlington. Received his Juris Doctor degree as part of an inaugural class of the University of North Texas College of Law. Mr. Thomas currently works as a solo practitioner in Dallas, Texas. His practice focuses on areas of estate planning, probate, real estate, and small business. In fact, in 2020, the Law Office of LD Thomas PLLC was named the best law firm in Black Dallas by Dallas Weekly. We are also glad to have with us Eric Reese, who is law professor at the University of North Texas at Dallas College of Law. Now, Eric is a past chair of the Real Estate, Probate, and Trust Law section of the State Bar of Texas. He's a fellow of the American College of Trust and Estate Council, and he is board certified in both tax law, estate planning, and probate law by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization. So Mr. Thomas, Mr. Reese, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am going to attempt to share my screen, and hopefully this works seamlessly. All right, so there we go. Can you guys see that? Can everyone see that? Fantastic, fantastic. Before we get into the presentation, Eric and I are going to kind of tag team on this. I just want to thank Ms. Sherrod for sharing such a phenomenal story, for all the work that you've done. Also, Mr. and Mrs. Ross, and of course, the Texas Small Farmers and Ranchers community-based organization, as well as Rudy and the Black Caucus, and of course, the Texas Bankers. So everybody that's put this together, it's just been so phenomenal. It's so needed, and it's great information. And I for one, am honored to just be a small part of that. So thank you guys for doing that. With that, we're going to jump right into the presentation. Go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to echo that. I mean, it's been a remarkable and powerful presentation so far. I mean, we're just thrilled to be part of this. Some amazing people, amazing group, and both LD and I and the law school at UNT Dallas, we're thrilled to be part of this. This is amazing.
Absolutely. So we put this slide up here. I'm LD, that's Eric. In case you couldn't tell which one of us had the best law firm in Black Dallas, help you kind of sort that out, right? But I think Ms. Speedway did an amazing job letting you know who we are and what we do. And with that, we'll jump right into the presentation. So today's presentation is just going to cover kind of the basics of estate planning. And it's so crucial, and we'll talk about this, it's so crucial when trying to preserve land and assets and making sure that's not lost. I have a saying that you can't create generational wealth if you don't have a plan to transfer wealth to the next generation. And so estate planning and asset protection is a major key for that. And that's kind of what we're going to cover today. This area of law is very wide and vast. We're going to kind of cover the basis and get you guys kind of primed to think about your particular situation, why estate planning, asset protection, and so forth is important. With that, we'll take a look at the agenda. Why is asset planning important? Estate planning basics. Where there is a will, there is a way. I kind of came up with some of these myself, so my corny side kind of came out, but hopefully they will, be a hallmark and be a touchstone for you to remember some of the things that we talk about. Where there's a will, there's a way. Also learning to trust, where we'll talk about the basics of different various trusts. putting the estate in real estate. And we'll also talk about some tax considerations. So with that, we will move right into why is estate planning important? There is a saying that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Well, I'm going to change that a little bit. And a lot of times with estate planning, people don't care how much you know until they know why they should care. Why should I even care about estate planning? With our audience today being small farmers, ranchers, and even some individuals, just being an individual, estate planning is important for everyone in every aspect of your life. But some of these things I think will jump out at you. And here are some interesting statistics. About 60% of Americans die without a will. There was a report that came out that said about 3.8 million acres was lost in the past century. And when we say was lost, it didn't go missing. It was lost from the families because of improper estate planning, and it wasn't able to transfer properly. So it kind of got lost in the system, and then taxes, no one paid the taxes, and it went back to the government. So families lost about 3.8 million acres in the last century, which equated to about $6 billion in estimated value. Most of that, sadly, belongs to African Americans. I want to pause right there. That happened because of improper or lack of estate planning. The way that works in the real world is grandpa has land, grandpa doesn't have a will, so it goes to his 8 children, and generations pass, and the control of that land is diluted. Now there are about 15, 20 people who own that property, but it never transferred into anyone's name. Therefore, no one's paying the taxes. No one is taking ownership of it, and it's foreclosed on and it's gone. I don't think I have to tell this particular audience the importance of land, right? God's not making any more of it. And not only is it income producing with small farmers and ranchers, but that's money, that's wealth. That is what can be used to fund the dreams of next generation. If you have someone in your family who doesn't want to continue to work in the family business, but maybe they need money to go to school, maybe they need money to become a doctor, or so on and so forth. It's opportunity, and that is gone in the blink of an eye without proper estate planning. And it's sad, and it's completely heartbreaking. Kind of taking a step back from the land aspect, just estate planning in general. There's a statistic that the average lifetime of an inheritance is about 17 months. So what does that mean? So typically, if someone passes away and they leave money to a loved one, that money only lasts about 17 months. There are tools at your disposal when you work with an estate planner and a proper attorney to set up different types of trust to help that money last longer and be used properly. So even though a lot of this may be geared towards our small farmers and ranchers, think about your assets in general, just as a human, just, taking care of your family, taking care of your loved ones should something happen to you. Giving a grieving young person a lump sum of money is probably not the best thing to do. There are tools that we can put into place to help manage that money for them. And speaking of money, people, one thing I hear a lot is, oh, well, I don't have very much. I don't have a lot of money. The other statistic that I'd like to talk to you about is there was a survey and they asked people what they considered life-changing money. The average answer was $19,800. And for millennials, the average answer was $5,000. They felt that that would be life-changing money. So it may not be a lot to you, but it is a lot to someone. And whatever it is, you need to make sure that it's cared for and passed appropriately. And Eric, I didn't know if you wanted to chime in on anything that I've said so far before we move forward.
No, I just, I think LD and I have both seen too many just tragic cases of inheritances not getting planned and the money just getting frittered away. And there's tools there to deal with it. And I just, LD, you've already hit it, but I just can't emphasize enough that you don't want that money to just, vanish into the void. And that's what'll happen if you don't plan for it.
Yeah, and we'll touch on some of those tools a little later. Okay, so here's some of the benefits of estate planning. You're in control. I think probably the oldest saying in our line of the legal profession is, if you don't have a plan for your stuff, the state of Texas has a plan for your stuff, and I promise you, you will not like it. Okay, you will also, if you take the reins and you decide, let me put my plan in place, let me do what I want to do, you can then start making provisions for loved ones. And some of those provisions, nobody knows your loved ones and your family like you do. Let's have a real conversation. We have some people in our family who are probably not very responsible with money, right? And so just as Eric mentioned, and we kind of touched on earlier, you can make provisions setting up different types of trusts, and we'll talk about those, to care for people and have someone else manage that money for them to make it last a little longer. If you have someone who's a ne'er-do-well, who's constantly getting attacked by creditors or that sort of thing, setting up certain trust protections and spendthrift clauses and things of that nature can protect those assets. The state of Texas is not going to do that for you. You have to set up a plan and speak with an attorney to do that. Also, cost savings down the road, having a plan. If you don't have a plan, what is those saying? Lack of planning. If you don't plan, what do you mean? Plan to fail? Failing to plan is planning to fail, right? And so what happens is when that time comes, for whatever reason, you've passed on, getting caught off guard and trying to transfer assets could be costly if you don't already have something in play, right? The cost of probating your assets, transferring assets into the proper name, the amount can get exacerbated, but you can cut that down if you have thought that out and have a plan and have it laid out properly. You can plan in advance for taxes. And Eric is an excellent person to talk about some of the tools at your disposal to plan for your tax implications upon your passing. Do you want to touch on that at all right now? Or?
Sure. And I know, LD, you'd also, I think you also had in your plans, we're going to be talking about the exemptions that are available and whatnot. I mean, the good news is, as far as death taxes go, the government now gives us over a $12 million exemption. So a lot of people don't have to worry about estate tax anymore. But that's scheduled to go down to about 6 million in a few years. And some of us are fortunate enough, maybe you got extensive land holdings, you do have to worry about planning for those taxes too. And there's a lot of tools that can be used, sort of a complicated toolkit, but there's more elaborate tools you can use to arrange your land holdings so that they pass on to your heirs without estate tax being due. And then just apart from estate tax, a lot of people worry about income tax. Mm-hmm. And one of the nice benefits we've got in the law is when you die and you own land that's gone up in value, generally speaking, the government kind of forgives that gain so that your heirs can now sell the land, without having to pay income tax on it. And even if they don't want to sell the land, I know a lot of our goals here are to avoid that, to keep the land in the family. Still having the gain forgiven means you can start sort of resetting your tax clock, and there's various tax benefits that flow, depreciation and whatnot, that you can get each year potentially on some assets, depending on what you own. So there's a lot that can be done there if you're conscious of what the rules are, and you just make sure you have a good plan in place.
Absolutely. The other two things, plan for end of life care. A lot of people think estate planning, or it's just when I'm gone, I'm deceased, so what does it matter? There are a lot of stages in life, and estate planning takes all of that into consideration, right? So end of life care, that you want to, planning for possible nursing home or in-home nursing, or not just for yourself, but your loved ones, that sort of thing. And also it eliminates confusion and eases burden, okay? Fact of the matter is, a lot of this will come into play when you pass away. Your family is probably already grieving and dealing with so many emotions. Doing the work now to put a plan in place can ease that. And it's a wonderful gift to give them, to allow them to grieve and process without having a ball of confusion just dumped on them. So there are some emotional and humanistic benefits as well. So we've talked about why it's important, why you should care. Let's kind of cover some of the basics of estate planning. What is estate planning? In essence, estate planning primarily involves making arrangements for the transfer of your assets after death, okay? But there are some ancillary documents and things, and we'll touch on those, that come into play while you're still here, okay? And a thorough estate plan, a thorough, that kind of covers at least the basics, a good foundation, I should say. One is a directive for your care due to incapacity, okay? If something were to happen to you, if you fall, hit your head, anything where you're not up and moving around, what's the plan? And for a lot of our guests today, your farm, it's not only a lot of you live there, you also, it's work, it's business, it's so integrated into so many different aspects of your life. It's important that you have a plan and you've designated backups for everything if you're not there to keep everything running. Guardianship and inheritance manager for minors if you have minor children. Also provisions for family members with special needs. A lot of times we are so used to taking care of things and taking care of our loved ones and being that person. We don't stop to think, what if I'm not here? Who's going to take care of them? And a proper estate plan can help you address that and alleviate some of those concerns. Life insurance and disability, you always want to look at those. If you have them, check the beneficiaries regularly, update them if necessary. Again, provisions for your business, attempt to minimize costs, taxes, and fees. And one thing I like to point out and underscore is there should be an ongoing discussion. A proper estate plan isn't a one shot, a one and done thing. You go through different stages and different phases of your life. Your businesses change, laws change, family dynamics change. And as those things change, you should be evaluating your plan. And hopefully you've pinpointed someone, an estate planning attorney to work with. And as those changes occur, you're having those conversations. I also tell people you should also have these conversations with your loved ones, because it will help you make certain decisions. Again, family dynamics are different, okay? And we can spend 2-3 hours talking about that. But one of the challenges for a lot of my clients is well, I've got this kid over here who's got all this money, and I got this kid over here who's kind of, knocking around, living pillar to post. Who do I give this to? Who do I give that? I think sometimes having those conversations with those children, because for the most part, parents want to be fair, right? Generally speaking. And I tell them that fair does not always mean equal. And so have those conversations, because what you're thinking this one may want, they may not want. So communicate with your attorney, communicate with your spouse, communicate with your loved one. It should be an ongoing communication. Eric, did you have anything to add?
No, I think you covered those points very well.
All right. So some of the building blocks of estate planning, the documents, the things that, the tangible things that actually create the plan. Power of attorney. So there's a durable power of attorney and a medical power of attorney. So the durable power of attorney is essentially your financial power of attorney. It grants someone the authority to handle business on your behalf, okay? The medical power of attorney designates someone to make medical decisions for you if you are in a position where you cannot make them for yourself. Again, beneficiary designations. So if you have life insurance, or sometimes even on bank accounts, you can designate people. And again, this all goes into your assets and making sure that your life and your assets and everything flows smoothly, even while you're here, right? So this is even some of these things are important before you leave. Guardianship for minor children, as well as any of your family members that may have special needs that you are the primary caregiver for. And the two big things, right? These are asset distribution, and there are two main avenues for asset distribution upon your passing. And that's a will, and those are trusts. Okay, so those are two things, and we are going to spend two whole sections kind of discussing those, because those are the two main pillars of asset distribution, and they each have pros, cons, disadvantages. And depending on your individual situation, a proper estate plan is individualized, right? Everyone's different. It's just like your DNA. All of your assets are different. Your wishes are different. Your goals are different. And so the tools that we use to build your estate plan should be individualized as well.
And LD, if I can just underscore
Absolutely.
something you mentioned a minute ago. You talked a little bit about guardianship, and I think it's important to understand you want to try to arrange things so that you yourself are not going to have to be subject to a guardianship. If you get older and you become incapacitated and you haven't put something in place, whether it's a power of attorney or a trust, and your land needs to be taken care of, or your other property needs to be taken care of, then the only thing people can do at that point is go to court and establish a court supervised guardianship, which means that every time your family wants to do something with your land or your other property, they're going to have to go to the court and get permission to do something about it. And we have good probate courts, we have good judges, but it doesn't matter how good they are. It's a cumbersome process. It's an expensive process. And so having named someone as your power of attorney, or name someone as trustee for you under a trust that LD will be talking about, can just save your family an enormous amount of grief and expense and time later.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because, I think stories are important. So I had a situation where there was a husband and a wife. And unfortunately, husband fell ill. He was incapacitated. He was in the hospital, and they had a joint checking account. And she had gone through all that, going through those expenses. He had a separate checking account that she didn't have access to, and she wanted access to that checking account and access to that money to kind of keep the bills going. But he had not signed a durable power of attorney. So she couldn't get access to his funds. So she was going to have to go through the guardianship process, which is as Eric pointed out, it's a lot more expensive. It's a lot more cumbersome. And the reason you have to do that is because as an individual, you grant someone the power of attorney. So you have to be cognizant, you have to be aware. That's something that you grant to another person. You have to do that before it's needed, right? You can't do that if you are laying in a hospital bed incapacitated. And so that's why then the courts have to step in, and there's a whole evaluation process that is extensive and expensive. But had you done that when you were up, you have to, there's an old saying, I love sayings if you haven't picked this up yet, right? When is the best time to plant an oak tree? It's 20 years ago, okay? When's the second best time? It's right now, okay? So you want to do these things before they're needed, because they tend to be a lot simpler and a lot less expensive when you do them that way. Where there's a will, there's a way. So let's talk about a will, right? I think everybody's at least familiar with the concept of a will, but what is it? A will is essentially a document where you lay out your wishes and what you want to happen to your assets upon your passing, okay? That's it in its simplest form. However, the state of Texas and every other state have requirements as to what a valid will is. And we will talk about why it's important to work with an attorney to make sure that your wills are valid and that they will hold up in court. So how does a will work? Once you have a will drafted and it's signed and properly executed, upon your passing, or when the will matures, okay, it means when you pass, the will is taken to the court and filed on the court with an application to probate. It is then evaluated by a judge. And if it's found to be valid and properly executed and approved by the court, then the wishes that you have detailed in your will be carried out, and the assets will be transferred to the individuals of your choosing. Okay, so we set up administration. Your debts will need to be paid, and then your assets will then be distributed to the people of your designation. Well, what happens if I die without a will? It's a mess. No, I'm just saying, no. If you die without a will, it's called dying intestacy. And at that point, your assets will be divided via the laws of intestacy. And that can, depending on your familial situation, that could be honestly pretty messy, right? And so it's passed to your heirs, however those are at that time. It is a little bit more expensive. And again, that's that plan that the state of Texas has for you. One of the things, again, just a story to give you. I don't know your situation. I don't know your love life, but I want to point this out because these are things that I've seen, okay? There is common law marriage in Texas, but there's not common law divorce. So there is the possibility that if you die without a will, that wife that you just quit talking to 30, 40 years ago and never divorced, she still has rights and she still has a claim to your property. So it's important that everything is kind of cleaned up, and I encourage you to put an estate plan together in general, because again, all of those ancillary benefits as far as setting up protective trust and all, the state of Texas is not going to guarantee that. The state of Texas is going to do that. They're just going to look and see who your heirs are and shoot the money out and go on. So setting up a will or a trust or a proper estate plan is going to be the best thing for you and your family. Can I draft my own will? You can, but I do not recommend it, okay? Technically you can, but again, as I mentioned earlier, those wills will have to be evaluated by the court. So you can draft your own will, but there are regulations and statutes that regulate even holographic or handwritten wills and whether or not they're valid. And if your will is not deemed to be valid, then it is as if It is as if you didn't have a will in the first place. So I encourage you, do not go to www.draftmyownwill.com because one, you are missing out on the expertise and you're missing out on the experience of an attorney who's done this before and can help guide you through pitfalls that you don't even know exist. And you can make sure that your will is properly drafted and executed and that your wishes will be carried out. Do you have anything, Eric?
No, I just, you know, we all have stories to tell, and the stories that are both best and worst, because, you know, it's the worst stories that are interesting, I guess, have always been with folks who have tried to do it on their own.
Yeah.
And there's lots of pitfalls you just don't think about. You know, something that's as simple. I had a situation once where somebody left a will saying that he left his, you know, Ford pickup to his son, and his wife, or at least his girlfriend who promoted herself to wife after he passed, said, well, wait a minute, I own half that truck. And so suddenly we had to have a dispute in the estate over the disposition of it because he didn't have the power to dispose of the whole thing. And so we had to have a whole big fight over it. And that's the sort of thing, you know, if you're trying to do it on your own, you're not necessarily thinking about those issues. And someone like LD can keep you out of trouble.
I try my best. Sure. Learning to trust. So we kind of talked about a will. And so the other pillar and the main avenue to dispose of your assets is a trust. And trusts are becoming more and more popular and more buzzwords. So let's talk about what is a trust. So a trust is a legal agreement that names someone to hold property for the benefit of another. What does that mean? What does that look like? So it's a three-party system, a three-party dance, if you will. And those key terms are the settler. So you have a settler, which is a person who establishes and funds the trust. And we'll talk about what funding the trust looks like and what that means, okay? So for a lot of you, if it's your estate plan and you've decided that you want to use a trust, you would be the settler because you would be the person who is establishing the trust. Now, the trustee is the person who manages the trust property, okay? So they're responsible for managing the trust. And we said it's a legal agreement that names someone to hold the property for the benefit of another. So the trustee is now holding the property for the benefit of another. Well, who is that other? That is the beneficiary. That's the third person or entity in this arrangement. And they are the person who benefits from this trust. Here's where things get really interesting. Here's where things get really, really interesting. You can be all three of these people in certain trusts. You can set this trust up, you can manage this trust for your benefit, and you can have, or you can have a corporate trustee, means you can hire an individual to be the trustee and manage it for your property. You can get really creative. So these are roles in setting up a trust, and different people can play different roles, okay? One thing that is crucial, and as I've talked to a lot of people who, I don't know, maybe they heard a commercial or saw something on social media about a trust that they don't get, is that you have to fund the trust. A trust only has control over the assets that are transferred into the trust, that are funded. So simply drafting the trust, setting it up, that's great. But you have to transfer those assets into the name of the trust. So with bank accounts, those bank accounts need to be switched over. When we're talking about homes, when we're talking about land, when we're talking about property, the deeds need to switch over to the name of the trust. Otherwise, they're not in the trust. And if they're not in the trust has no dominion and control over it. Okay, so just establishing the trust is not enough. You need to actually fund the trust. Eric, do you have anything to add about kind of trust at this point?
I think those are the key points. You're on a roll.
All right. So with the trust, one size does not fit all. And you have a lot of creativity with trust. There are all types of trust. These are the basic categories for trust. And, you know, maybe down the line, we can do a whole training on trust and what you can do with them. But just so you guys have a working knowledge of what the different types of trust. So an inter vivos trust is a trust that you set up during your lifetime. Okay, so while you're alive, you talk to an estate planning attorney, let's say myself, and we set up a trust. You're living, you set it up. That's an inter vivos trust. That's a trust that's set up in your lifetime. A testamentary trust is a trust that is set up after you've passed away. And the way that generally works is in your will, you can say, hey, if anyone gets any property under the age of 30, please put it into a trust managed by such and such and such and such, okay? And so that's a testamentary trust. So that trust is set up after you've passed. So you can either set it up while you're living, or you can try to have something set up upon your passing. The revocable trust and irrevocable trust. A revocable trust allows you as the settlor to make changes as you wish. You can change beneficiaries, you can take things in and out of the trust. You pretty much have dominion and control over the trust. With an irrevocable trust, it sounds just like it is. You cannot make those changes as easily. And for the most part, a lot of times it takes the signing off of the beneficiary and sometimes even a court to get those changes made. So that particular type of trust is more ironclad and it locks things down. You can't make changes. You lose control. There are benefits, pros and cons to each one. And again, depending on your situation, depending on what your goals are, that would determine which one is best for you. All right, so pros and cons of a will or a trust, okay? Like we've talked about these two different things. They all sound very beneficial. How would I know which one works for me? Well, one, again, it is very individualized and you would need to sit down with someone and talk about it. But in general, when you transfer assets via a will, the process of drafting a will tends to be a little quicker, okay, than setting up a trust and funding the trust. It tends to be less expensive, and these are generalities. It tends to be less expensive to draft a will. However, a will does need to be probated, which means there is a court proceeding and your assets are transferred after your passing. So your family would need to go to court. And because it's a court proceeding, there's a lack of privacy. When you pass and your family has to go to probate, like I said, it's a court proceeding. So those court documents are available to the public if someone wants to go and see what your will said at that time and who got what. And typically there's no protection for beneficiaries from creditors because the distribution, generally speaking, is made directly to the beneficiary. So they get the money, okay? If you leave the money, they get the money. And if they're having issues with creditors, because they have received that money, the creditors can then, attack or attach to that. And there's no protection for irresponsible spending for the most part. You can try to set some tools in place, but for the most part, generally speaking, once that distribution has been made to that person, if Johnny has a gambling problem, you've just given him the money to do whatever he wants with it, right? Now, transferring via a trust, you have a little bit more control. It avoids multiple probates. So as it relates to our landowners, it's important to note that land has to be probated, transferred through that court process in the state in which it exists. So if you own property in multiple states, say you own property in Texas, Georgia, and California, your family would need to probate that land, have to open up 3 different probate cases. However, if you had a trust, you transfer those assets to the trust, there's no need for probate. So you don't have to open up multiple probates because the land has been transferred into the trust and will be transferred in accordance to your designations that you set up in the trust. Protections from creditors and irresponsible spending. A trust holds those assets. So a creditor can only attach to what's been dispersed. Okay, so instead of giving them this whole lump sum of $300,000, if you give them, $1,000 a month, that's what they have. They don't have it until it's dispersed. So it kind of keeps, there's a level of protection of the assets. Now, we'll say it does take a little longer to establish and set up, and typically is a little bit more expensive to draft. But depending on your situation, it may make sense. And so that's why it's important to sit down and have a consultation that is tailored to your specific situation.
And LD, just to, I guess, add to one point you made earlier, you can combine the 2 concepts. So you can have a will, for example, you can have a will that creates a trust, and that doesn't avoid probate or address the privacy issues you mentioned, but it does allow the assets to be protected from the beneficiary's creditors or their bad decisions.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned that. And for a lot of my clients, we do combine them because we do a pour over will, right? And so in addition to a trust, you'll have a will that says, hey, if I forgot to put anything in the trust, send it to the trust and have the trust have dominion over this. Absolutely. So there are all types of tools that work in conjunction. So putting the estate in real estate, your land, your farms, your houses even come with a lot more than just your personal property. There are things that you need to consider and think about when deciding how to transfer or who to even transfer those assets to. One, they're a complex asset, okay? They're a complex asset. There's much to consider for a lot of our farmers. Again, there's a business aspect to it as well. So when you think about who's going to get this, who am I going to transfer it to? Do they have the capacity, whatever their capacity is, to manage this asset? Okay, be it just the home. Can they pay the taxes on the home all the way up to a farm? Can they manage it? Are they savvy enough to know what's needed and necessary? Generational accountability. Thinking about, hey, is this person that I am transferring this to going to be able to handle it? The emotions, liquidity, and tax implications. And I want to kind of touch on that, especially for our farmers. And this kind of goes back to our farmers and ranchers. It goes back to the issue of communication. Hopefully, a lot of you are having your properties evaluated under an agricultural exemption as opposed to, just property taxes, okay? Making sure that you're having the conversations to whoever you plan on transferring that to, that they understand what those responsibilities are, because those ag exemptions need to be renewed every couple of years, right? And so if they don't do that and you lose that ag exemption, the taxes on the property, if they're taxed a certain way, could be so enormous that they lose the estate. Okay, so you have to take those things into consideration. You have to have those conversations because they matter. And not having a plan, not having the conversation is setting everyone up for disaster. Even with something as simple as making sure that the person knows that they have to reapply or get recertified, if you will, for the agricultural exemption. That is one of the quickest ways to lose your property, because the taxes will be so enormous that they won't be able to pay for it, or you have to sell the majority of the farm to even pay for that. Okay, so making sure that that's incorporated in the plan. You can even set up a trust to make sure that that's paid for. You know, there's all these different tools, but you can't use the tools if you don't come talk to someone and have that conversation. All right, so other tax considerations. Oh, I think I kind of got ahead of myself. So agricultural exemption, that's how important it is to me that you guys know how important that is. Federal estate tax exclusion, I think Eric kind of talked on that a little bit, and the portability. And again, constantly reevaluate your plan. Your situations change, the laws change. You want to make sure that you are in the best situation to take care of yourself and your family for those things that you know are coming and those things that you know that you don't know are coming. And Eric, did you want to touch anything deeper about the taxes or anything while we're here?
I think we've probably covered. I know time's a little short, and
Right.
I think we're in good shape.
Okay. So I know we kind of went through that. I know it was kind of a lot, kind of like drinking out of a fire hose, but hope you guys found some benefit from it. Did you guys, were there any questions that we had that we wanted to address?
Powerful stuff once again, man, way above my pay grade. I know we do want to bring Rudy in. So please stay tuned. Rudy's going to come in and give you some information on consultation availability. So stay tuned. We do want to hit on a few questions here. So please use the Q&A chat. If we don't get to you, we'll circle back. Let me start reading a few of these right now. Let's see. We have one here. It says, what's the difference between a probate asset or a non-probate asset?
Oh, that's an excellent question, and I get that a lot. So a probate asset, a non-probate asset, a probate asset is an asset that needs, in order for it to be transferred, has to go through the probate process. A non-probate asset means it doesn't have to go through the probate process. The key designation is whether or not there's a beneficiary listed. So if there is a beneficiary listed, then it's typically not considered a probate asset because there's no need to go through the court system. So for the most part, insurance policies are non-probate assets because there's a beneficiary listed. I say for the most part, because what happens is if you're not reviewing those as you should, if your named beneficiary passes away before you do, then that asset, then that insurance policy is then paid to your estate. And so then it becomes a probate asset because there's not a beneficiary listed. So that's why it's important to constantly review those things. But if there's a beneficiary listed and they're still living, then typically that's a non-probate asset.
All right, I think I got another one. It did show up in the chat, so please do use the Q&A if you don't mind. But here it is. It says, for new homeowners, how do we get the agricultural exemption, and what do we need to show?
So that's a very extensive process, and we can do a whole training on that. But you do need to speak with someone who is familiar with that. It takes a couple of months to get it done because there's an evaluation the county has come out, and so we can kind of discuss that offline a little bit better. But there is a extensive process and various steps to get certified for the agricultural exemption. And one is it has to be in use, right? So is there livestock? Is it being farmed? So just your regular residential property with a dog running around is not gonna fly. So it does need to be an agricultural property that's either being farmed or has livestock on it. And there is an evaluation and application process that would need to be completed.
All right, and we could probably talk about putting together training for that. I do think
Yeah.
that may be county specific as well. So, but we can look at that. Let's see what else we have here. It says, when I pass away, can't the person I've designated as my power of attorney make all the necessary decisions for my assets and estate?
Yeah, I get that a lot too. No, they can't. The power of attorney and that authority that you've granted to that person ceases when you pass away. So when you pass away, the authority granted to your power of attorney, that also ceases. So those decisions that need to be made after your passing, they no longer have the authority to do that. So know that. So that's why it's important to have a plan. So no.
All right, we're gonna do just two more here and then we'll get it over to Rudy. Says, let's see. If I'm married, doesn't everything automatically go to my spouse?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Depending on your familial situation, if you have children, if you are a blended family, if you had children outside of the marriage, the state of Texas takes all of that into consideration. So the spouse just doesn't get everything, right? It also depends on the classification of the property, right? Is it community property? Is it separate property? So was it property that you had prior to marriage? Was it property that you inherited? Was it property that you got via an accident or settlement? All of those things factor into how that property will be divided. So it's not as cut and dry as, oh, I died, my wife or my husband gets it all. That would be a very boring life for us. So this keeps it interesting. So unfortunately, no, it's not that simple.
And just a related point on that, sometimes people think, well, as long as both of our names are on the asset, that means my spouse gets it, right? And for a lot of assets, that's not true. For land, that's generally not true. And for your home, that's generally not true. Your spouse doesn't just automatically get it just because both your names are on the deed.
That's correct.
All right, I'm gonna we'll do one more here and then we'll get this thing over. It says, and this one sounds more like a statement. It says, honestly, I don't care what happens with my assets when I die. I'm fine letting my family fight it out. Do I still need a estate plan? I'm thinking they can just deal with it when I'm gone. What do you say to that?
Well, the first thing I say is I want to come to your house for Thanksgiving because it sounds like a lot of fun, whoever that is. But, one of the things that we kind of touched on in the earlier part of the presentation is some parts of the estate plan affect your life while you're still here, right? Incapacity planning, taking care of your business while you're still here. So if you want them to fight it out and you want to watch them from the great beyond have a battle royale, that is one thing. But there are other considerations while you're still here. Like we talked about, power of attorney, medical, financial, end of life care, setting up a trust, because it seems like you don't want them to take care of you, right? Whoever that person is, maybe setting up a trust for yourself to make sure if you're at a point where you need care, who is that person that you've designated to care for you? So there are things about the estate plan that come into play prior to your passing. So yes, you still need one. And I do recommend, if your family's like that, then I do recommend that you come talk to somebody really quickly.
All right, good word there, good word. So for those of you who did not get your specific questions answered in the Q&A, please know that we're going to be reviewing them over the next week or so. And we'll probably be sending out just a frequently asked question memo to the attendee list. I also saw a question on the recording. We'll probably include that in the list as well. so everybody will have access to the recording. But now I want to send things back to you, Rudy, to discuss estate planning needs and consultation availability.
Wow, thanks, P-Wade. And I just got to say, based on, I know we're a little bit over time, but based on the number of people in the audience, you guys were captivating. You did a phenomenal job, LD and Eric. Thank you for giving all that information. You know, I know we heard from the last person who said, I'd rather have a Royal Rumble with my family trying to figure out who's going to get what in the family as well. You know, one of the things that reasons why we wanted to have this today is because we don't want that to happen. Have a plan, have a plan, have a plan. You do not want to die intestate. I'm telling you, you saw what they said, you saw what's happening. You don't want all that wealth to go to the government. You don't want that lack of that ability for your family members, your loved ones to control what your assets are that you worked hard to go ahead and have with that. And as LD said, this isn't just for when you pass away. This is for now. Setting up trust and a variety of different things right there as well. One of the things that I learned in law school, which I was really surprised about, was that I always just thought, you know, okay, there's just different methods and ideas that white people get instead of people of color, and that's why they're able to go ahead and add assets and do things well in a business standpoint. No, it's just knowing the rules to the game. And what's happened is that you have people here literally on this screen who are willing to work with you to know the rules to the game, to understand what your opportunities are, for you to be able to go ahead and use the same kind of techniques and ideas to protect your estate, protect your values as anybody else in this country. Again, that's the night of this program. We're here for you tonight to go ahead and do that. And with that said, P-Wade previewed it, and it's true. One of the things that we wanted to make sure we understand with you is to connect you with practitioners, lawyers who would be able to go ahead and work with you on these different ideas and concepts right here. And our next lawyer, just like LD Thomas said to you, is another lawyer who's willing to go ahead and work with you, speak about the times, assets, and ideas, see what you can do regarding what you can do with your estate planning. Now, John Connor comes from the law firm of Graves, Dougherty, Hearon Moody here in Austin, Texas. He's another board certified attorney in estate planning and in probate law. That means that these people know what they're doing. And in doing so, you know, he has a degree in taxation, a master's in taxation, a degree from Texas Tech. He's actually went ahead and has a variety of different aspects of where he's actually centralized his practice with. Like LD, John believes in trying to work and make sure that you, as the people who have been in the backbone of this country for a long period of time, are able to have the opportunities and the rights that you have reserved to you. John, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rudy. I appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for letting me come and speak to you all for just a few minutes. I promise I will not take too much time here at the end of this presentation. And first, I do want to commend Mr. Reese and Mr. Thomas on just an excellent presentation. I had jotted down some notes that I wanted to talk on, but I don't think I'm going to go over any of them because they covered them so explicitly well. I will just stress again how important it is to make sure you do have your estate planning documents in place, your will, possibly a trust if that's a good fit for you, certainly your powers of attorney. As Rudy said, you know, it's the rules of the game. It's the tools that we have available to help you keep your land, you know, your wealth that you built up, you know, for your family that you've worked so hard to accumulate. And so we can help, you know, pass that down generationally, not just one generation, but hopefully several. Which brings me to, I think, to one point that I really want to make sure that was made. You know, being an estate planning attorney, it is important to me that my clients know I don't ever view any meeting with a client or any project with a client as a one-off, especially in the estate planning field. I envision that from, you know, that meeting or my representation continuing from that meeting through their wills, updating those wills as life changes happen, you know, children, grandchildren, big events like that. And then certainly as the wealth and the land starts to pass from generation to generation, we are there to be a part of that process as well, that probate process that, you know, again, that LD pointed out that we have the will for, to dictate explicitly where the assets of your estate are going to go. We like to be a part of that. Very often I will work with clients, I'll get their will set up. And then, you know, I will represent them over the years, and then I will hear from them, from a child saying, you know, mom or dad has passed away, what do we do? And then we work with the family. And then, you know, the idea is that would be a long-term representation that even that I or other colleagues or LD or Eric would, you know, transfer on to their younger colleagues as well. So again, I would just reiterate what LD and what Eric said in that, estate planning is critically important. Even as LD said, if you don't think you have a lot, it is a lot to somebody. So it's important to make sure you get everything in line so that you can help your family know that everything's kind of been taken care of when they're going to be dealing with some grief or some stress, be it because maybe you've passed away or just because you're incapacitated. Both of those situations can be difficult for folks. And again, what I would say is lean on your attorneys in those times. That is what we are there to help you get through, to answer those tough questions about what needs to happen next, who's in charge, based on what the documents say. That's what we're here, and that's what we want to do. And I think that's what gives us a lot of great joy, even in those tough moments for us, is knowing that we're helping people, can continue to pass their wealth, their assets on generationally. We're making sure they're taken care of in their end of life process and beyond that. And we would absolutely, love the opportunity to speak with you to determine, what tools are going to be a good fit for you. It's going to be different for everybody. It's very rarely a one size fits all or anything like that. So, again, I think, we would love to work with you, love to help you and help you and your families.
And thank you, John. There's something I do want to reiterate, something P. Wade says, that there will be an FAQ sent out after this program, which will answer some of the questions that we have in the chat. Additionally speaking, it will have the contact information for both John and LD, and they're willing to go ahead and do an initial free consultation. Did you hear that? Free consultation, free. Take advantage of that free consultation, and to go ahead and talk to you about your assets and work from there. And they'll work with you regarding, because each case is different. Each case is different. And these two are skilled practitioners who are able to go ahead and work with you and make a discernible difference and making sure that you have the right choices in what you're doing from here. Again, these resources, these assets, these things, these people here are co-conspirators. They're advocates for you to work in here to make sure that you and your family are taken care of to the best abilities that you can. Please take advantage of that and make sure that you're able to go ahead and make sure what you need, you're able to have that. LD?
Yeah, I was going to say, I had if you guys wanted, I could put my email address up there. If anybody wanted to contact me to set up their free consultation, we could do that as well. Because it's important that we strike while the iron is hot, right?
Yeah. I like it. So he's going to put his contact information in the chat. Well, you're recording the chat too as well. So we'll send it over there. So please take that into consideration. John, you can do the same as well. So make sure you check the chat. It'll be over there with that as well. Oh, or it's on the screen right here. And again, write that down, that information. Make sure you have that in front of you. These folks are here for you to make sure that they're able to take care of it as well. So please make sure you're able to take advantage of that and take advantage of that opportunity. I know that tonight has been a lot of information, a lot of data points. But also, I want to say, I think it's been pretty inspiring. I think hearing the story regarding Shirley, hearing what Chris had to say regarding the history of the bank, or the Texas Bankers Association with the farming community, get a lowdown from Eric and LD about, okay, listen, this is what estate planning is. This is the basic right here. This is what you need to go and work from that. And from John saying the advocacy and what to work well and how to go ahead and make sure work for these issues. And I got to say something too about the Ross family. We wouldn't be here, any of us here today, if not for the Ross family. I know they're not going to say it themselves, so that's why I'm saying it. And what they have done in advocacy for each and every one of you is absolutely astounding. And honestly, in a lot of ways, humbling. I made mention before about how I thought that God works in mysterious ways, and I thought it was quite apropos that this is taking place right now before the birthday of MLK. That we're running one of the most sacred and special weekends over here with that we were able to go ahead and show a bridge and a gap from the civil rights movement to what we are today, and why it's important and why it's impactful for not only for us to be able to speak about our history, but learn those life lessons and apply them into the future. The Ross family from the onset has done a phenomenal job of speaking the truth, living the lives we want to, advocating for others who did not have their voices in the place right there as well, and reaching and connecting folks from there. I've got to say, Mr. and Mrs. Wass, you did an excellent job raising P. Wade. And I've got to say that we got to thank you for our ability to go ahead and be here today. With that said, P. Wade, I'll turn it on for you to close out the night.
Man, you making a black man blush, bro. That ain't easy to do. But we just want to close things out. Quick reminder, we'll be sending out a brief survey within the next hour or so. Just so please be looking out for that in your email inbox. We do ask that you please take a few minutes just to answer the 4 to 5 questions and hit that send button for us. It really goes a long way to make sure we continue bringing you valuable information and presentations. I do want to give another special thanks to all our participants and panelists, Texas Bankers Association, the Texas Black Caucus Foundation, Shirley Sherrod, LD Thomas, Eric Reeves, LD Thomas Esquire, my fault there. The law firm of Graves, Dougherty, Hearon Moody, and also our team at Texas Small Farmers and Ranchers Community-Based Organization, and to everyone else out there who, took the time to spread the word on this important topic. So to everybody, God bless. Thank you.
How about them Cowboys?
Great job, you guys. That worked. That was so well done. I appreciate each and every one of your assistants. That was really, really impactful and powerful.
We were thrilled to be, it really was great to be part of it. This was
It was a pleasure. The
Wonderful.
pleasure was
Exactly
all
what we
mine.
was looking for. I love it. Thank you so much, each of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, y'all, we've done a number of these, and by far the
Thank
best
you.
presentation was outstanding. Thank y'all very, very much.
Yeah, thank y'all for having us.
Thank
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So much.
God bless everybody.
Supper. Everybody go eat supper. Huh?
okay.
Somebody,
All right,
right?
good to see y'all.
Bye-bye.
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 Okay. God bless.
Mhm.